Welcome back, fellow seekers of the shadows. You've tuned into Stories of Crime, the place where the veil between the mundane and the monstrous is brutally ripped away. Tonight, we aren't just reading a report. We are opening a file, marked top priority, tucked away in the darkest corner of the archives. We're going to step across that chalk line and peer into the void, where human nature meets its most terrifying extremes. In this hour, the street lights flicker, the shadows deepen, and the truth is often far more chilling than any fiction you could invent. Forget the heroes. Tonight, we focus on the villains. On the motives that curdle the blood, and the consequences that echo forever. So, dim the lights. Lock your doors. Take a deep, steadying breath, because once the story begins, there's no turning back. This is Stories of Crime. And the case we're unfolding tonight is Lone Star Planet. The Hook, a solar system with a drawl. Alright, settle in, because today, we're not just diving into a book, we're launching headfirst into a cosmic rodeo where the stars wear spurs, the laws are flexible, and diplomacy is less about polite conversation and more about avoiding a shootout at high noon. If that sounds like your kind of interstellar adventure, then you're in for a treat, because we're about to talk about H. Beam Piper's absolute gem, Lone Star Planet, also known by its equally evocative title, A Planet for Texans. Now, picture this with me, really lean into the imagery. You step into a dimly lit, smoky saloon, but hold on, this isn't your dusty old western dive. Oh no. This place, it's elegant. Think rich mahogany, polished brass gleaming softly under the ambient glow of what might be a gas lamp or some alien equivalent. There are velvet drapes, perhaps a crystal chandelier, not opulent, but definitely refined. The air hums with the low murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft strumming of some melancholic, futuristic folk music. And in the middle of it all, a man, immaculately dressed in what you might call frontier formal, is calmly ordering a drink. He's got an easy smile, a confident posture. He seems perfectly at ease. Then, another man approaches. He doesn't charge, doesn't shout. There's no sudden, dramatic confrontation. Instead, there's a quiet, almost deferential nod, a brief exchange of polite words, perhaps something about the weather, or the quality of the local brew. Then, with a movement so fluid, so economical, it's almost balletic, something glints. A quick, precise motion. No fuss, no flailing. And our first man, well, he sways just a little. His confident smile falters, just for a second, before he slumps, almost gracefully, to the floor. And the kicker? The absolute gut punch of absurdity that hooked me from the very first page? No one bats an eye. No shouts of alarm, no frantic calls for the local constabulary. The bartender continues to wipe down the counter. The musicians don't miss a beat. The surrounding conversations merely ripple slightly, perhaps a brief pause, a silent nod of acknowledgement, and then they pick right back up. It's not a crime, it's not even a tragedy, not really. It's a performance. An art form, meticulously executed and observed, appreciated for its style and efficiency. This isn't just murder, this is assassination as a fine art. It's a carefully choreographed dance of deadly intent, and the audience, it seems, has very sophisticated tastes. When I first read that opening scene, my jaw probably hit the floor of my imaginary spaceship. I mean, we're talking about a culture where the deliberate taking of a life isn't just tolerated, it's refined. It's got its own etiquette, its own critics, probably even its own Best of the Year awards for artistic merit in terminal disputes. It's like watching a Shakespearean play, if the lead actor died for real in the first act, and everyone applauded the realism. It instantly establishes that we are not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. We are very, very far from any semblance of galactic order or terrestrial common sense we might take for granted. This wasn't just a simple act of violence, it was a cultural statement, a window into a world utterly, delightfully, and terrifyingly unique. It's the kind of premise that just screams, you have to know more. And that, my friends, is your warm, albeit slightly blood-spattered, welcome to New Texas. And when I say New Texas, please understand, I don't mean a quaint little colony of Texans. Oh no. I mean an entire, sprawling, self-sustaining planet populated exclusively by the most aggressively, stubbornly, unbelievably Texan people to ever walk, or probably swagger, the face of a celestial body. Forget your earthbound stereotypes of boots and hats. These aren't just Texans, these are super Texans. They've taken rugged individualism, don't tread on me, and everything's bigger in Texas and cranked it up to about 1 million. Imagine a world where every single inhabitant possesses the grit of intro plus narrator POV, the diplomat's nightmare. All right, settle in, folks. And when I say settle in, I mean really settle in. Nestle deep into your most comfortable chair, procure your most cherished, most robust beverage, something that warms the soul, something with a bit of an intellectual kick. Because today, we're not just opening a book, we are unfurling a tapestry. A vast, intricate, and often bewildering tapestry woven with threads of liberty, fear, and the surprisingly potent aroma of galactic beef. We are about to embark on a journey. And not just any journey, mind you, but one that our protagonist, bless his meticulously organized, profoundly earthbound heart, would rather chew his own arm off, or perhaps endure an entire conference on postmodern economic theory, than undertake. He is, to put it mildly, reluctant. And that, my friends, is where our adventure truly begins. Today, we're diving, headfirst and without a single safety net, into H-beam Piper's utterly brilliant, often criminally overlooked, and perpetually relevant saga, Lone Star Planet. Now, for the purists and the bibliophiles among you, yes, you might also know this incredible work by its other, equally evocative monikers, A Plague of Masters, or for those who appreciate a more cosmic scope, The Galactic Whirlpool. Whatever title graces your bookshelf, whatever edition you cradle in your hands, the essence remains precisely the same, a profound, rollicking, and shockingly prescient exploration of individual liberty, the true grit of human nature, and what happens when the very foundations of civilization, law, and order are, well, let's just say they are vigorously renegotiated at the sharp end of a blaster, or perhaps a rather persuasive political argument backed by a very large, well-fed cattle ranch. Piper, for those unfamiliar with his genius, was a master of the intelligent, grounded, and often darkly humorous space opera. He wasn't about warp drives and laser swords as much as he was about the people behind the tech, the societies they built, and the timeless conflicts that inevitably arise when humanity pushes against new frontiers. His work, often written in the mid-20th century, somehow feels more relevant than ever in our own tumultuous times, offering not just escapism, but a lens through which to examine our own evolving definitions of freedom and governance, of individuality versus collective security. It's a style that demands engagement, not just passive consumption. But before we get to the philosophy, the blasters, the bewildering politics, and yes, the aforementioned beef, let's turn our attention, with a mixture of empathy and perhaps a touch of gentle, narrative prodding, to Stephen Silk. Ah, poor Stephen Silk. If ever there was a man perfectly sculpted by the gentle, manicured, and utterly predictable hand of Earth's most refined academia and diplomatic circles, it was he. Picture this, if you will, a man whose very existence was a testament to the virtues of comfort, routine, and intellectual pursuits. A man for whom adventure was less about slaying dragons and more about the thrilling, cerebral discovery of a rare first edition in a dusty old bookshop, or perhaps unearthing a forgotten historical footnote in an obscure galactic archive. His greatest challenges might involve navigating the intricate, almost balletic social protocols of a high-stakes UN dinner, or perhaps deciphering the latest post-structuralist critique of intergalactic trade agreements, meticulously footnoted, and cross-referenced, naturally. Stephen Silk, you see, was a creature of comfort, of meticulously scheduled routine, of perfectly brewed Earl Grey sipped from bone china, and the hushed, almost sacred sanctity of the diplomatic pouch. He was a scholar, a brilliant linguist, a seasoned diplomat, an intellectual thoroughbred, groomed and polished for the stately, carpeted corridors of power, not the untamed, dust-blown fringes of the known galaxy. His universe was one of carefully crafted words, of subtle negotiations, of abstract concepts. He was, in essence, the very anti. Chapter 1, The Unwanted Promotion. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving headfirst into a classic that, honestly, feels more relevant than ever, H.B. Piper's Lone Star Planet. Now, if you're new to Piper, get ready for a blend of sharp social commentary, thrilling adventure, and often, a hefty dose of sardonic humor aimed squarely at the absurdities of centralized power. For those of you who know Piper, you know what I mean. He's a master at showing us how the best intentions of a grand, unifying bureaucracy can absolutely crash and burn against the stubborn, often illogical, but deeply cherished traditions of a free people. This isn't just a sci-fi romp, it's a masterclass in cultural friction, political maneuvering, and what happens when an unstoppable force, the Solar League, meets an immovable object, the planet known as New Texas. Today, we're kicking off with what I'm calling Chapter 1, The Unwanted Promotion. Because, let's be honest, few things in life are quite as soul-crushingly inevitable as an opportunity that feels suspiciously like a punishment. And for our protagonist, Stephen Silk, a seemingly innocuous summons is about to turn his comfortable bureaucratic existence completely upside down. It's the inciting incident, the spark that ignites this entire powder keg of a story, all thanks to the ever so efficient, ever so frustrating Solar League bureaucracy. So, grab your imaginary Stetson, or your preferred beverage, and let's get into it. Imagine, if you will, the kind of office building that exists solely to drain the color from your soul. That's where we find Stephen Silk. Not in some grand, bustling diplomatic hub, but probably in a quiet, climate-controlled cubicle, or the 23rd century equivalent, within the vast, labyrinthine complex that serves as the administrative heart of the Solar League. Silk, a career diplomat, isn't exactly a rising star, nor is he a disgraced exile. He's comfortable. A cog in the immense machine, doing his job, probably dreaming of an early retirement on some placid, regulation-compliant planet. He's the kind of guy who knows where all the official forms are, understands the subtle nuances of interdepartmental memos, and probably views excitement as finding a new, more efficient way to route requisition forms. Then came the summons. Not a formal, public recognition, mind you, but the kind of discreet, coded message that screams urgent, confidential, and possibly career-altering. It leads him not to a bustling conference room, but to a smaller, more sterile office. Think polished chrome, muted tones, and the faint, recycled hum of the air purification system. The kind of place where bad news is delivered with the same detached efficiency as a status report on the latest galactic agricultural yields. Across the desk from him sits, or rather, perches, Undersecretary Blaine. Blaine is the quintessential bureaucrat, perfectly groomed, meticulously precise, and with eyes that seem to register data points more than human emotion. You know the type. The kind of person who could probably recite the entire Solar League penal code backwards and forwards, but wouldn't recognize a genuine smile if it slapped him in the face. Blaine, without preamble, get straight to it. Silk, the council has reviewed your file. Your adaptability, your experience in navigating unconventional diplomatic situations has been noted. Now, Silk probably raises an eyebrow at unconventional. Most of his diplomatic career has been decidedly conventional. But before he can even ponder what distant, minor dispute they're throwing his way, Blaine continues, his voice flat, devoid of warmth or enthusiasm, "We're promoting you. Effective immediately, you are the new Solar League ambassador to New Texas." Promotion. New Texas? Silk's internal monologue probably went something like, "Wait, what? New Texas? But Van Wyck is there, isn't he?" Commander Van Wyck, the previous ambassador, a gruff, old spacer with more medals than sense, but dependable. And that's when Blaine drops the bomb, with all the K-Sug. Chapter 2, Landing on Lone Star. All right, buckle up, space travelers. If Chapter 1 was our slow, deliberate ascent into the void, a tantalizing glimpse of the journey ahead, then Chapter 2, Landing on Lone Star, is where the real atmospheric turbulence kicks in. It's where our protagonist, Silk, a man undoubtedly accustomed to the ordered, perhaps even sterile, environments of interstellar travel and his home world, is unceremoniously dumped onto a planet that is, to put it mildly, aggressively different. We're not just talking about a change of scenery here, we're talking about a full frontal assault on his senses, his expectations, and frankly, his very understanding of civilization. This isn't just a planet, it's an experience, and it hits Silk like a freight train made of tumbleweeds and grit. Imagine, if you will, stepping out of a perfectly climate-controlled spacecraft, the hum of its engines still vibrating in your bones, only to be immediately enveloped by an alien world. For Silk, Lone Star isn't just alien, it's aggressively familiar in the most unsettling ways. It's a distorted reflection of something he might recognize, twisted through a funhouse mirror of cultural evolution and environmental adaptation. Let's talk about the physical environment first, because before Silk even shakes a hand or hears a word, Lone Star punches him square in the retina with its sheer, unyielding reality. The moment that airlock hisses open, you can almost feel it. The heat, an oppressive, suffocating blanket that clings to your skin, making every breath a conscious effort. It's not merely a dry heat, it's an ancient, sun-baked inferno that seems to draw all moisture from your very bones, leaving a parched ache in your throat. It's not just warm, it's a dry, relentless inferno, a sun that seems to bear down with a personal vendetta against anything seeking shade. The sky, I imagine, is a cobalt canvas, so intensely blue it almost hurts to look at, stretching endlessly into a horizon that seems impossibly distant. There's a raw, untamed beauty to it, but it's a beauty that promises no comfort, no respite. And the land itself? Forget the manicured parks or bustling metropolises silk might be used to. Here, the landscape unfurls in an epic, almost biblical sweep of wide, flat plains. They stretch out, seemingly without end, a vast, ochre-colored expanse punctuated by sparse, hardy vegetation, tough, scrubby bushes that cling to life with a desperate tenacity, and the occasional, gnarled tree, twisted into shapes that speak of centuries battling wind and sun. It's a landscape that screams survival of the fittest, a place where softness is an evolutionary disadvantage. The air is thick with the scent of dust and something else, something wild and untamed, the faint, musky odor of alien life, perhaps, or just the raw, baked earth itself. You can practically taste the grit on your tongue just reading about it. Every gust of wind seems to whisper tales of hardship, of generations struggling against this very land, forging their existence from its stubborn embrace. Now, among this vast, arid tapestry, there are the inhabitants. And by inhabitants, I don't just mean the people. I mean the cornerstone of their economy, the very giants that roam these plains, the cattle. But these aren't your typical bovines, oh no. These are giant cattle. Enormous, hulking beasts, described with a kind of awe that borders on trepidation. Think of a longhorn, then triple its size, give it thicker hide, perhaps a more formidable set of horns adapted for the harsh environment. They move with a slow, ponderous grace, their massive forms dwarfing everything around them, casting long, distorted shadows across the plains. They are both magnificent and terrifying, a living testament to the scale of Lone Star. Their very presence emphasizes the pioneering spirit required to tame, or at least coexist with, such a world. For Silk, these aren't just animals, they're walking, breathing symbols of this planet's rugged, unforgiving nature, a stark contrast to any domesticated fauna he's ever seen. Chapter 3, The Super Cowboy Society. Alright, welcome back, cosmic travelers, to our deep dive into H. Beam Piper's fascinating universe, specifically his groundbreaking novel, Lone Star Planet, or as it's also known, A Planet for Texans. If you're just joining us, buckle up, because we're about to land squarely in the heart of New Texas, a world unlike any other you've encountered in science fiction. In our previous chapter, we scratched the surface of what makes this planet so compelling, its raw, untamed spirit, its echoes of the American frontier projected onto a stellar stage. But now, in Chapter 3, The Super Cowboy Society, we're going to peel back the layers of this unique civilization and truly understand the fabric of its existence. Our goal today is pure world building. We're going to unpack the social structure of New Texas, revealing how its economy, its lack of traditional government, and its peculiar brand of mandatory politeness all intertwine to create a society that is both utterly dangerous and profoundly intriguing. So, grab your space saddle, maybe a strong cup of something, because we're heading into a place where tradition meets the future, and every citizen is, by necessity, their own law. The economy of super cattle and yeast vats. Let's start with the foundation of any society, its economy. What makes New Texas tick? What drives its markets, its daily routines, its very way of life? The answer, my friends, is beautifully simple in its complexity. It's all about the super cattle and the ubiquitous yeast vats. Imagine, if you will, the vast, sun-baked plains of New Texas. This isn't just any cattle country, this is super cattle country. Piper, with his usual genius for extrapolation, gives us a breed of livestock that makes Earth's longhorns look like miniatures. These aren't just big, they're enormous, hardy, and incredibly adaptable to the harsh New Texas environment. They are the cornerstone, the very lifeblood of the planet. These super cattle provide everything. Their meat is the primary protein source, of course, but their hides, their bones, their everything becomes a resource. Think about the scale of this operation. We're not talking about small family farms. We're talking about sprawling ranches, larger than some Earth continents, managed by tough, independent ranchers and their equally tough cowboys. This is the ultimate frontier existence, a constant battle against the elements, against rustlers, who, as we'll see, are dealt with very directly, and against the sheer logistical challenge of managing herds that could number in the tens of thousands, if not more, across vast distances. The image is vivid, isn't it? The clanking of spurs, the smell of dust and animal, the boundless horizons. It's the Wild West, but with spaceships and plasma rifles instead of six-shooters and steam trains. The super cattle aren't just livestock, they are a symbol of the New Texan spirit, immense, resilient, and utterly central to their identity. They represent self-sufficiency and raw, untamed potential. They are the mobile wealth of the planet, requiring constant vigilance and a mastery of the land, no matter how alien it may be. The skills of a cattleman on Earth are magnified 1,000-fold here, demanding a unique blend of animal husbandry, survivalism, and combat readiness. But cattle alone, even super cattle, aren't enough to sustain a planetary civilization. This is where the yeast vats come in. Think of them as the unsung heroes of the New Texan diet and industrial base. While the cattle provide the protein and the raw materials, the yeast vats fill in the gaps. They produce everything from synthetic foods, nutrient pastes, flavorless but sustaining meals, to industrial compounds, even basic building materials. They are the quiet, high-tech engine humming in the background, providing the necessary supplements for a thriving, if specialized, population. Imagine the huge, gleaming fermentation tanks, perhaps deep underground or within protected facilities, churning out essential vitamins, carbohydrates, and specialized Che. Chapter 4, A Dinner of Danger. Alright, welcome back, everyone. If you've been following our journey through H. Piper's brilliant Lone Star Planet, then you know our protagonist, Cal Silk, has just crash-landed onto this wild, untamed world, Fomalhaut 3. He's a diplomat, a man of protocols and interstellar law, thrust into a frontier where those concepts feel distant, to say the least. He's already had a taste of the planet's rugged inhabitants and their unique brand of justice, or lack thereof. But now, our story takes a turn from the dusty plains and makeshift airfields to something far more insidious, the polished, yet equally perilous, world of high society. Tonight, we're diving into what I've dubbed Chapter 4, A Dinner of Danger. This isn't just a meal, it's a masterclass in social navigation, a treacherous tightrope walk that Silk is utterly unprepared for. His mission, his very survival, hinges on his ability to understand that on Fomalhaut 3, even the most elegant banquet table can hide a multitude of knives. Pause for effect. Imagine this: Silk, still somewhat disoriented from his ordeal, is suddenly thrust into a lavish evening reception. It's held in the governor's mansion, a beacon of civilization in a land that often seems to defy it. Picture the scene: polished floors reflecting the soft glow of alien chandeliers, the murmur of sophisticated conversations, the clink of glassware. On the surface, it's all grace and decorum, an oasis of calm. But beneath that veneer, like the tectonic plates of a volatile planet, powerful forces are grinding against each other. This is where Silk truly begins to understand the complex power dynamics of Fomalhaut 3. He's met the official face of authority, the governor, a man trying to maintain order with one hand while likely brokering peace, or, more accurately, managing ongoing conflicts, with the other. But around him are the true movers and shakers, the colossal ranchers whose holdings span hundreds of thousands of square miles, their faces etched with the sun and the shrewdness of men who've built empires from nothing but grit and gunpowder. There are the heads of the burgeoning mining consortiums, their fortunes rivaling those of ancient kings, their gazes sharp and assessing. And then, there are the matriarchs, formidable women in their own right, who wield influence with a subtle nod or a well-placed whisper that can shake a man's reputation, or his future, to its core. Silk, the consummate diplomat, tries to read the room. His training tells him to observe, to listen for alliances, for power plays. But here, the signals are different. There's an underlying tension, a predatory politeness that prickles the air. People are talking, laughing, engaging in what appears to be cordial banter, but every word seems to carry a double meaning, every smile a potential threat. It's a game of wits and veiled aggression, and Silk, poor fellow, is trying to play poker with a deck he's never seen before. He's used to the intricate dance of intergalactic diplomacy, where rules are defined, treaties are binding, and a handshake means something. Here, a handshake might just be a prelude to a challenge. Slight pause, more reflective tone. Now, amidst this high-stakes social arena, we are formally introduced to a name that will echo throughout Silk's journey, the Bonny family. And let me tell you, When you hear Bonnie, don't think of gentle lambs. Think wolves. Think rattlesnakes. They are one of the most powerful, and arguably the most dangerous, ranching families on Fommel 3. Their presence at this banquet isn't just attendance, it's a declaration. The Bonnies arrive with an almost palpable gravitational pull, drawing eyes and whispers. There's a matriarch, of course, whose silent judgment seems to chill the air, and her sons, men who carry themselves with an air of entitlement and a readiness for confrontation. They are the embodiment of the fierce independence and territoriality that defines so much of this planet. And with their introduction, Silk begins to grasp the sheer complexity of the rancher. Chapter 5, The Aggie Conspiracy. All right, welcome back, fellow travelers of the cosmos and connoisseurs of classic sci-fi. We've journeyed with Silk as he's landed on this wild, untamed world, a planet of vast plains and fierce, independent spirits. We've seen the beauty, felt the isolation, and perhaps, like Silk, started to fall a little bit for the rugged charm of it all. But, as any good story, and indeed, any good planet, will tell you, underneath the picturesque surface, there are always currents of tension, whispers of discord, and sometimes, a full-blown storm brewing. And in this chapter, our fifth stop on the Lone Star planet journey, those storms are about to break. We're going to pull back the curtain on something far more insidious than just a challenging assignment, the Aggie Conspiracy. Up until now, Silk's mission has largely been about navigating the social landscape, understanding the local politics, and frankly, just trying to survive the planet itself. He's been the new guy, the outsider trying to make sense of a world that operates by its own unique rules, all while maintaining that professional distance an agent needs. But he's about to discover that the biggest threat isn't a stampeding herd of local beasts, nor is it the harsh elements. No, the real danger here wears a crisp uniform and carries a clipboard. It resides in the cool, calculated logic of those who believe they know best for everyone, whether everyone agrees or not. Let's talk about the Aggies. Now, if you've been following along, you've probably heard this term tossed around. It's short for agricultural technicians. On paper, these folks are the backbone of planetary development. They're the scientists, the engineers, the planners tasked with, quote-unquote, optimizing the planet's resources, ensuring efficiency, boosting output, and generally bringing order and progress to what they often see as a chaotic, underperforming frontier. They represent a very specific vision of the future, one built on control, precision, and maximized yield, a sterile utopia of perfect numbers and predictable outcomes, where every natural process is a variable to be managed, not a force to be respected. But out here, on the sprawling, windswept prairies, where the free-roaming ranchers live, the Aggies aren't seen as heroes of progress. Far from it. To these independent, fiercely proud men and women who have carved out their existence from the raw planet, descendants of those initial brave settlers who brought a piece of old Earth's Texas spirit with them. The Aggies are, well, they're the enemy. They're the bureaucrats, the meddlers, the self-proclaimed experts who show up with their fancy machines and even fancier theories, threatening to dismantle a way of life that has been passed down through generations. It's a classic story, really, of the pioneer spirit clashing with the encroaching tide of civilization, but on a galactic scale. Think about it this way. Imagine someone coming into your home, your sanctuary, and telling you that the way you've arranged your furniture is inefficient. Or that your garden, which you've painstakingly nurtured with your own hands, isn't producing enough according to their metrics, and that they're going to tear it all up and replace it with sterile, automated hydroponics. Now, scale that up to an entire planet, an entire culture. The ranchers value freedom above all else. They cherish the open spaces, the rugged self-sufficiency, the challenge of working with nature, not trying to dominate it entirely. Their herds roam vast territories, their land is immense, and their decisions are, or at least were, their own. They believe in the natural rhythms of the planet, in the resilience of life adapting to its environment, in the wisdom of traditions honed over generations under alien suns. They see the Aggies as trying to cage their freedom, to fence in their spirit, to turn their vibrant, living world into a sterile, predictable factory floor, a giant spreadsheet where every variable is controlled and every unpredictable spark of life is ironed out. Chapter 6, Trial by Combat. Literally. Alright, folks, buckle up. Because if you thought the first 5 chapters of our journey through Lone Star Planet were a wild ride, you haven't seen anything yet. We're about to dive headfirst into a legal system so utterly bizarre, so fundamentally alien to anything we know, it makes our own jurisprudence look like, well, like a polite tea party. This, my friends, is where New Texas truly shows its teeth. Welcome to Chapter 6, Trial by Combat. Literally. And our mission today is to truly understand the unique judicial system of New Texas. Prepare yourselves, because this is going to be a mind-bender. So, we've established that New Texas is a planet forged in the fires of individualism, self-reliance, and a healthy, or perhaps unhealthy, disregard for external authority. Its colonists, mostly from Earth's American Southwest, doubled down on their frontier ethos when they struck out for the stars. And nowhere is that philosophy more starkly, more brutally, encapsulated than in their legal framework. Let's start with the big one, the cornerstone of New Texan justice, the concept that will make any earthbound lawyer, especially one like our protagonist, Silk, want to tear their hair out. On New Texas, homicide is only a crime if the victim didn't deserve it. Let that sink in for a moment. Homicide is only a crime if the victim didn't deserve it? I mean, wow. Just, wow. Think about the implications of that, for a second. On Earth, we have concepts like self-defense, mitigating circumstances, intent, premeditation, accident. We dissect motives, mental states, the exact trajectory of events. We have a vast, intricate web of laws designed to determine culpability and assign punishment based on the act itself, and the state of mind of the perpetrator. On New Texas, it's far simpler, and infinitely more savage. The act of taking a life is almost secondary. What truly matters is the worthiness of the life taken. Now, who decides if someone deserved it? There's the rub, isn't it? It's not some abstract moral judgment passed down by an impartial deity. It's a societal, almost tribal, consensus. If the victim was weak, if they were foolish, if they challenged someone stronger and lost, if they were perceived as a drain on the community, or simply unable to defend their own life or property, well, then, they probably deserved it. Their death becomes less a tragedy and more a natural, albeit harsh, consequence of their perceived inadequacies in the brutal landscape of New Texas. It's the ultimate expression of survival of the fittest codified into law. Your right to exist is directly tied to your ability to defend that existence, not just physically, but also in terms of your social standing, your perceived utility, your sheer force of will. Weakness is not just a vulnerability here, it's a capital offense, in a roundabout way. And by capital, I mean it can literally cost you your life, with your killer potentially facing no legal repercussions. Imagine Silk, the brilliant, logical, earth-trained lawyer, arriving on this planet, ready to argue points of law, precedent, and human rights. He's equipped with a silver tongue, a sharp mind, and a deep understanding of justice as we know it. And then he encounters this. It's like bringing a finely crafted chess set to a bare-knuckle brawl. His entire professional toolkit is rendered utterly, terrifyingly useless by this one core tenet. It's not just a quirk, it's the bedrock of their entire social contract. It breeds a certain kind of citizen, self-reliant, quick to anger, quicker to draw, and constantly assessing the worthiness of others. It's a society built on the principle that if you can't protect what's yours, or your own life, then you didn't truly deserve to keep it. Chilling, isn't it? And it's this chilling reality that Silk is about to experience firsthand. So, with that rather unsettling legal concept firmly in mind, let's talk about how this system actually plays out in practice. Because if you're thinking, how on earth does a trial even function in that environment? Chapter 7, The Diplomat Learns to Draw. Alright, folks. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're just joining us, you've stumbled into the dusty, sun-baked, and utterly captivating universe of H. Beam Piper's Lone Star Planet. We've been following the bewildered, somewhat exasperated journey of our protagonist, High Commissioner Stephen Silk, as he's been unceremoniously dropped from the pristine, bureaucratic corridors of Galactic Central into the wild, untamed frontier of Texas. And let me tell you, it's a culture shock of cosmic proportions. For a man who probably considered a misplaced stapler a major crisis, this planet is essentially one giant, perpetual emergency, always teetering on the edge of chaos. Last time, we left Silk wrestling not just with the local customs, but with the very air he breathed, the food he ate, and the palpable sense of danger that clung to the Texas dust like iron filings to a magnet. He'd arrived with his diplomatic pouches and his pristine uniform, only to find that on Texas, a 6-shooter spoke louder than any treaty, and a handshake was worth more than a dozen legal briefs. Now, in what I've dubbed Chapter 7, the diplomat learns to draw, we're going to witness something truly remarkable, Silk's crucible. His training montage, if you will, but with far more grit, psychological torment, and existential dread than your typical cinematic sequence. This isn't just about learning new skills, it's about a complete, irreversible rewiring of his very being. It's about adaptation, not just for survival, but for a semblance of belonging in a world that fundamentally doesn't care about his credentials, his rank, or his delicate sensibilities. So, buckle up, because things are about to get real. You might even feel the grit between your teeth just listening. 1. The crash course, from pen to pistol, protocol to pragmatism. Imagine, if you will, our man Stephen Silk. A diplomat. A man of words, of nuanced negotiation, of polite, carefully worded correspondence. His hands are accustomed to the smooth click of a stylus on a data slate, to the weight of official documents on imported vellum, to the delicate clink of teacups at diplomatic receptions where every word is weighed, measured, and often, deliberately ambiguous. Think about that for a moment. His entire professional life built on the art of not saying what you mean directly, on finding the polite circumlocution. Now, picture those same hands, chafed and trembling, developing blisters and callus, gripping the cold, unyielding steel of a Frontier Model 6-shooter. Or, even more jarring to his refined sensibilities, the smooth, deadly lines of an energy pistol, a weapon designed for absolute, rather than relative, deterrence. This wasn't a hobby, it wasn't a choice, it was an absolute imperative. This wasn't a leisure activity, folks. This wasn't a leisurely seminar on local defense strategies with a complimentary buffet and artisanal coffee. This was a crash course, an immersion therapy in the brutal, unforgiving realities of Texan life. From the moment he arrived, Silk was confronted with the stark truth, hammered home by every rough-hewn face and every wary glance. On this planet, you had to be able to defend yourself. Not just from rival factions or roving bandits, but from the very environment itself, where a wrong step or an unexpected predator could end you just as swiftly as a bullet. Danger truly lurked in every shadow, every untamed patch of wilderness, and even, sometimes, in the seemingly friendly smile of a stranger. And so, his lessons began. With a grimace, I imagine, and a growing, desperate sense of urgency. He learned to draw. And not just to draw, but to draw fast. I mean, lightning fast. The difference between life and death on Texas could be measured in milliseconds, in the blur of a hand clearing leather, or the precise flicker of an energy beam vaporizing an incoming threat. He spent hours, days, weeks, out in the blistering, unforgiving sun, the dust kicked up around him like a malevolent spirit, practicing, his muscles aching, his mind reeling from the sheer physicality of it all. Sweat stinging his eyes, the acrid smell of gunpowder and ozone clinging to his clothes. He learned the specific weight and balance of different firearms, the proper stance, the side picture, the bone-jarring recoil that threatened to dislocate his shoulder. He learned the meticulous maintenance, the precise cleaning, the swift reloading, the intimate, almost sacred, dance between man and machine that forms the bedrock of self-reliance on this particular frontier. And it wasn't just firearms, either. Oh no. There were knives, there were improvised bludgeons, there was rough and tumble hand-to-hand combat, all taught with a no-nonsense pragmatism that would have made his bureaucratic colleagues faint clean away at the sheer uncivilized brutality of it all. It was about raw, brutal effectiveness, stripped of all pretense. But the training wasn't confined to ballistic physics, nor just to the grim mechanics of survival. Oh no. Far more subtly, far more insidiously, he was being schooled in the local customs. And these weren't quaint traditions to be politely observed, they were the very laws of the land, etched not in statute books, but in the calloused hands and uncompromising hearts and minds of its people. These were the fundamental rules of engagement for human interaction in a hostile world. He learned the sacredness of a straight answer. On Texas, evasion, obfuscation, diplomatic doublespeak, these were not just frowned upon, they were seen as insults, as signs of profound weakness, as grounds for immediate distrust, and potentially, outright conflict. Texans valued honesty, bluntness, and sincerity above almost all else. If you said something, you meant it. If you made a promise, you kept it, even if it cost. To the psychological shift, shedding the bureaucrat, embracing the Texan. Now, this is where it gets really interesting for me, as a storyteller and as someone who appreciates deep, profound character development. Silk's training wasn't just about muscle memory, it was about a profound, almost spiritual, transformation. It was the psychological shift, the shedding of one identity and the reluctant, agonizing embrace of another. It's not just a man learning to survive, it's a man learning to be someone entirely new, forged in the crucible of this harsh new world. Initially, Silk resisted. Oh, he resisted fiercely, with every fiber of his being, with every ounce of his ingrained protocol. He was a diplomat, for crying out loud. His tools were intellect, reason, protocol, the subtle art of compromise. His uniform was spotless, his demeanor impeccable, his worldview carefully ordered and predictably structured. He viewed the Texan way of life as crude, barbaric, a horrifying regression to some primitive, almost animalistic past that civilization had long since transcended. He clung to his bureaucratic ideals, his notions of cosmic order and universal procedure, like a drowning man clings to a splintered piece of wood in a raging ocean. Every uncomfortable lesson, every dusty, jarring encounter, every blunt retort that bypassed polite decorum, chipped away at his carefully constructed, sophisticated identity. He must have felt like he was being flayed alive, layer by agonizing layer, of everything he thought defined him. He probably spent sleepless nights, lying on a rough cot under an alien sky, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, fantasizing about returning to Galactic Central, to the hushed corridors, the predictable schedules, the comforting banality of paperwork and structured debate. He'd try to justify his resistance, telling himself he was upholding the true principles of civilization, that he was merely enduring this temporary savagery for the greater good, a necessary penance before rescue. His mind, trained for logical processing and elegant solutions, would be screaming in protest at the illogic and brute force of this world. But necessity, as they say, is a harsh mistress. And on Texas, necessity wore spurs and carried a loaded pistol and rarely bothered with pleasantries or excuses. Silk quickly realized that his old ways, his old thought processes, his very identity as a diplomat, were not just useless, they were actively dangerous. They were a liability, a gaping weakness in a world that rewarded quick thinking, decisive action, and an unyielding will to survive. His carefully curated soft skills were worthless here. Only hard, brutal facts and even harder skills mattered. The turning point wasn't a single, dramatic epiphany, I don't think. That's too clean, too neat for a world like Texas. It was a gradual erosion, a slow, relentless grinding down of his old self. It was the cold sweat of a near miss, the burning ache in his shoulders after hours of monotonous, frustrating practice, the silent shame of a clumsy mistake that could have cost him or someone else their life. It was the chilling, stark realization that this was his reality now. There was no escape hatch, no recall order waiting in the wings. This was it. Sink or swim, and the current was pulling hard, threatening to drag him under. And so, slowly, painstakingly, Silk started to swim. He stopped acting like a Texan and started thinking like one. The stiff collar of his diplomatic uniform, which he probably abandoned for more practical attire anyway, began to feel less like a badge of honor and more like a symbolic noose, constricting his very breath. He started appreciating the directness, the absolute lack of pretense, the raw, unvarnished honesty of the Texans. He began to understand that their barbarism was not wanton cruelty, but was born of necessity, of a fierce, desperate independence forged in the ceaseless fires of a hostile planet. Their rudeness was often just efficiency, a way to cut through the noise and get to the point. His posture. 3. The first ounce of respect, a minor skirmish, a major step. Now, All this training, all this internal wrestling, it had to lead somewhere, right? It had to be tested, not just in practice, but in the crucible of real-world danger. And on Texas, tests often came with bullets and blood, or the searing hiss of energy weapons. It couldn't be a grand, heroic battle, not yet. That would be too clean, too neat, too Hollywood for Piper's gritty realism. No, for Silk, his first true test, his first real taste of the Texan seal of approval, came in what was, by local standards, a minor skirmish. And believe me, on Texas, minor could still mean deadly, with permanent, unforgiving consequences. Picture this: Silk is out with a small scouting party, perhaps on the fringes of a disputed territory, or maybe just guarding a vulnerable supply convoy moving through a treacherous canyon pass. The air is tense, the sun relentless, beating down on the dust-choked land. They've been tracking signs of a rival clan, or perhaps a band of opportunistic raiders, the kind of ever-present threat that forms the background hum of Texan life, a constant low-level danger. Suddenly, without warning, an ambush. A crackle of energy weapons tears through the air, the sharp retort of slugs hitting rock, the familiar, terrifying whistle of ricochets zipping past ears. Chaos erupts. Horses rear, men shout, and the pungent smell of fear mixes with ozone and dust. Silk's initial reaction? Probably pure, unadulterated fear. A cold dread seizing his gut, his diplomatic training screaming at him for a nonviolent resolution, for a chance to talk. His instincts, his new training, would be screaming for immediate action, but his mind, still rooted in its diplomatic past, would be struggling to process this raw, visceral, immediate violence. He'd probably want to negotiate, to wave a white flag, to call for a parley. But there's no time for that, absolutely none. This isn't a conference table with rules of order, it's a desperate firefight for survival, pure and simple. But this time, something is profoundly different. The hours spent on the dusty range, the mental reprogramming, the sheer terror of potential death, it all clicks into place. It kicks in. His hand, almost without conscious thought, goes to his weapon. Maybe it's a 6-shooter, heavy, and familiar now in his grip. Maybe it's an energy pistol, humming with destructive potential that he's learned to respect and wield. He doesn't just cower, he reacts. He raises the weapon, finds a target, and fires. He might not be the fastest draw in the West, not the most accurate shot, not the most seasoned fighter by a long shot. But he doesn't freeze. He doesn't break. He doesn't run. He stands his ground, shoulder to shoulder with men who, weeks ago, he considered savages. He takes a shot, perhaps a lucky one born of desperation, perhaps a carefully aimed one born of his burgeoning skill and newfound resolve. He might provide crucial covering fire, distracting an enemy from a vulnerable companion, or reload under pressure with practiced efficiency, or even just hold a vital position that prevents his companions from being flanked and overrun. It's not about Rambo-level heroics here. It's about simply doing his part, about not being a liability, about being present and effective when it matters most. The skirmish is eventually resolved. Maybe the raiders are driven off, maybe casualties are taken on both sides. The dust settles slowly, like a shroud, and the silence that follows is thick with adrenaline, the lingering smell of ozone and burnt powder, and the ragged breaths of the survivors. Everyone is breathing heavily, their nerves frayed, checking their weapons and their companions. And then, there's a moment. A quiet, understated moment that speaks volumes. A Texan, a grizzled veteran, perhaps the leader of the party, a man who had eyed Silk with open suspicion and thinly veiled contempt just weeks before, turns to him. No effusive praise. No backslapping. No grand declarations. Just a nod. A curt, "All." Chapter 8, Politics at Gunpoint. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into Murray Leinster's classic, Lone Star Planet. If you've been with us since the beginning, you know we've traversed the vast, untamed landscapes of Zame, met its rugged, fiercely independent ranchers, and caught glimpses of the simmering tensions beneath its deceptively peaceful surface. We've seen Silas Booth, aka Silk, arrive with his clandestine mission, trying to untangle a mystery that feels more like a knot tightening with every passing chapter. Last time, we left off with Silk navigating the treacherous social currents of the ranching community, trying to understand the whispers of unrest, the strange disappearances, and the growing sense of unease that permeated the very air of Zame. He's been trying to be a diplomat, a detective, and frankly, a survivor, all wrapped into one. He's made some allies, sure, but he's also stepped on some toes, and the shadows around him are getting longer, more ominous. The stakes were undeniably high then, a tense, simmering pot on the stove. But trust me, in this chapter, that pot boils over. Because in Politics at Gunpoint, we're witnessing a full-blown escalation. The Aggie threat, which we've been talking about in hushed tones, as a looming storm on the horizon, is no longer just a distant rumble, it's a thunderclap right over Zame's unsuspecting head, shaking the very foundations of its fragile peace. This is the moment. This is where the antagonists, the unseen puppeteers pulling strings from afar, decide to finally reveal their hand, ripping away the velvet glove to expose the iron fist beneath. We've talked about the Aggies, this shadowy consortium of corporate interests and land speculators back on Earth, salivating with unholy greed over Zame's untouched resources, its verdant plains, its strategic potential. For too long, in their eyes, these riches have been wasted on a handful of stubborn, self-sufficient ranchers. They've been patient, playing a long game, sowing seeds of discord, quietly undermining the ranchers' way of life through economic pressure and subtle coercion. But now, that patience has utterly run out. They're done with subtle manipulation, done with negotiations, done with the pretense of legality. They want absolute control, and they want it now. And they're willing to take it by force, by deception, and by any means necessary. The villains make their move to seize power from the ranchers. Imagine a high-stakes chess game that has been going on for years. You've been making strategic moves, sacrificing pawns, positioning your knights and bishops with painstaking care, believing in the rules of the game. But then, suddenly, your opponent, frustrated with the slow pace, sweeps half the pieces off the board, kicks over the table, and declares checkmate with a laser gun pointed directly at your king's head. That's essentially the visceral, terrifying shift that occurs here. The Aggies, through their well-placed proxies and ruthlessly efficient operatives already embedded deep within ZAME's social and economic fabric, launch a coordinated, audacious, and profoundly hostile bid for power. This isn't just about buying up tracts of land anymore, it's about taking the reins of an entire planet. It's a hostile corporate takeover disguised as a political revolution, or perhaps, the other way around. How do they execute this brazen power grab? Well, it's a multi-pronged assault, as any truly effective coup d'état typically is. Firstly, they exploit the existing political structures, or, more accurately, the fundamental lack of robust, unified governmental, and defensive institutions on ZAME. The ranchers, for all their inherent strength, their indomitable spirit, and their fierce independence, are largely decentralized. Their focus is, by necessity, on their individual ranches, their sprawling herds, the day-to-day survival of their families and operations. They possess traditional councils, time-honored customs, and informal systems of justice, yes, but they crucially lack a centralized, decisive government. Chapter 9, The Siege of the Embassy. All right, folks. Settle in, grab your favorite beverage, maybe a snack. You're going to need your wits about you for this one. Because if you thought things were getting intense in our last chapter, if you felt that slow, simmering tension building like a pressure cooker about to blow, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. I mean it. This is the moment. The absolute, undeniable turning point. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to our deep dive into Harry Harrison's seminal sci-fi novel, Lone Star Planet. We've been through a lot with our protagonist, Silk, and the disparate crew he's found himself entangled with. We've navigated the treacherous political landscape of Xylos, dealt with layers of alien bureaucracy, and watched, almost in slow motion, as the fragile threads of diplomacy frayed, one by one, before our very eyes. We've witnessed the subtle power plays escalate into thinly veiled threats, and those threats transform into increasingly aggressive posturing from the native Xylosian regime. We've seen the whispers turn into shouts, the occasional thrown rock escalate into full-scale street brawls, and the polite disagreements devolve into outright hostility. And now, my friends, we've reached the absolute precipice. This isn't just a turning point, it's the moment where the gears grind, sparks truly fly, and everything we've come to understand about the delicate balance, the fragile peace, on Xylos is about to be utterly shattered. This, my dear listeners, is Chapter 9, The Siege of the Embassy. And let me tell you, if you're looking for where Lone Star Planet truly earns its stripes as a gripping, pulse-pounding sci-fi thriller, this is it. This is where the action climax officially begins. Hold on tight, because it's going to be a bumpy, electrifying ride. You can almost feel the chill, almost taste the metallic tang of fear and anticipation, as we open this chapter, can't you? Imagine standing there, inside the United Planets Embassy. This isn't just any building, it's a fortress, a monument. A gleaming, formidable structure of reinforced plasteel and advanced alloys, designed specifically to project an image of interstellar power, stability, and intergalactic cooperation. It's a beacon of order and supposed neutrality, now utterly transformed into an isolated island, a lonely rock in a roiling, tempestuous sea of hostility. The air outside crackles, not just with the strange, humid atmospheric quirks unique to Xylos, that particular blend of exotic alien flora and industrial exhaust, but with something far more volatile, the palpable, raw, unadulterated rage of a multitude. A vast, seething, multi-species multitude. The embassy is surrounded. Officially. Unofficially. Completely. There's no longer any doubt, no more room for interpretation, no more optimistic spin from a desperate PR department. What started as angry, albeit contained, protests, then quickly escalated to violent demonstrations, then erupted into full-blown street riots, has now culminated in a devastating, overwhelming encirclement. From every angle, the imposing, futuristic architecture of the embassy building, with its soaring spires, reflective surfaces, and panoramic viewports, is completely hemmed in by a swirling, chaotic, yet terrifyingly unified mob. You can hear their chants, a cacophony of alien languages, guttural human curses, and the rhythmic thud of thousands of feet, all blending into a single, overwhelming roar of hatred and singular intent. It's not just noise, it's a physical assault on the senses. The ground trembles slightly, not from some seismic event, but from the synchronized stamping of thousands of feet, the rumbling approach of armored vehicles. The sheer weight of their numbers, their unified purpose, feels like a physical force pressing against the very walls, a monstrous, unseen hand squeezing the life out of the structure itself. And the silence from within, that's what always gets me. That chilling, terrifying, heavy silence that falls after the frantic, failed attempts at communication have final. Chapter 10, The Truth Revealed. Alright, welcome back, my fellow travelers through the cosmos and the human condition. You've been with me through the dust and the heat of the Lone Star Planet, through the political intrigue, the whispers of rebellion, and the ever-present shadow of the Aggie threat. We've dissected the characters, pondered the implications, and felt the palpable weight of the unknown. But if there's one thing a good story, and indeed, life itself, insists on, it's that eventually, the curtain must be drawn back. The veil's lifted. The truth, however inconvenient or startling, must be revealed. And that, my friends, is exactly where we find ourselves today. This isn't just another chapter, it's the chapter. The one where all the loose threads begin to weave into a tapestry, albeit a dark and complex one. We've been circling the drain of a profound mystery, the assassination that rocked the very foundations of this nascent society, the murder that plunged a planet into deeper uncertainty. Today, we unravel it. We pull back the layers of deceit, and we confront the betrayer. This is Chapter 10, The Truth Revealed. And trust me, it's a ride that relies less on the thunder of blaster fire and more on the sharp, piercing light of intellect. It's about wits, not just bullets, and the chilling realization that sometimes, the greatest threats come from within. Silk exposes the traitor within the ranks. Remember Silk, our intrepid, often cynical, always observant protagonist. The man with the almost preternatural ability to see beyond the surface, to connect the seemingly disparate dots that most would overlook. He's been piecing this together, hasn't he? We've seen him sifting through the evidence, weighing the alibis, scrutinizing the motives. It's been a slow burn, a gradual accumulation of inconsistencies, odd behaviors, and crucial omissions that only someone truly paying attention could catch. And perhaps, only someone with a mind as unburdened by conventional expectations as Silk's could truly put together. The setup is exquisite. We're not talking about a sudden, dramatic accusation yelled across a crowded room. No, this is far more sophisticated. Silk, ever the strategist, orchestrates a situation, perhaps a seemingly innocuous briefing or a high-level council meeting, where all the key players are present, including, crucially, his suspect. The air is thick with tension, though most don't even realize why beyond the general anxiety of their current crisis. They're still caught up in the immediate threat, the looming Aggie invasion, the political instability caused by the very assassination Silk is about to solve. They're looking for answers to the future, not realizing the most damning answer about their past is about to be laid bare. And then, he begins. He doesn't point fingers immediately. That's not his style. Instead, he starts by calmly recapping the known facts of the assassination. He talks about the security breaches, the specific timing, the unique access the killer must have had to bypass layers of defense. He highlights the forensic anomalies, perhaps a detail about the specific energy signature of the weapon used, or the entry point into the secure zone, or even the lack of certain evidence that should have been present at the crime scene, indicating a deliberate cleanup. He builds a logical framework, brick by painstaking brick, each statement a verifiable fact, each deduction a step closer to an inescapable conclusion. Imagine the scene: the room is silent, almost unnaturally so. The faces around him, initially complacent, then curious, then increasingly uneasy as the pieces begin to click into place, even for them. Silk's voice, calm and steady, cuts through the tension. He's not angry, he's meticulous. He's like a surgeon, carefully dissecting a complex problem, revealing the rot beneath the surface. And as he speaks, he starts to narrow the field of suspects, not by direct accusation, but by the sheer, undeniable weight of elimination. Only someone with X clearance could have done this. Only someone with Y motive W. Chapter 11, The Alamo of the Future. Alright folks, buckle up, because we've reached the point in our journey through H-Beam Piper's incredible Lone Star planet where everything, and I mean everything, comes to a head. If you've been with us since the beginning, tracing the path of our quick-wit protagonist, Silk, through the dusty, chaotic, and utterly unique landscape of New Texas, you know we've been building to this. The Aggies, the forces of mechanical conformity, rigid order, and frankly, a bit of soul-crushing bureaucracy, they've finally cornered our freedom-loving individualists. They've laid siege to the very heart of Texan defiance, the futuristic, fortified Alamo. And now, as we dive into what I've affectionately titled Chapter 11, The Alamo of the Future, we're about to witness not just a battle, but a clash of philosophies, a struggle for the very soul of a planet. This isn't just about who holds the Alamo, it's about how a society defines itself, how it fights for its right to simply be. This is the final stand, the grand resolution, and trust me, it's going to be a wild, chaotic ride that only Piper could have orchestrated. The air inside the Alamo, usually buzzing with the low thrum of independent commerce and the easygoing chatter of its inhabitants, now crackled with a different kind of energy. A nervous, electric tension. Outside, the metallic legions of the Aggies, polished and precise, moved with the grim, unfeeling efficiency of well-oiled machines. Their heavy assault vehicles, armored to withstand the improvised arsenal of the Texans, advanced relentlessly. Laser fire, precise and cutting, began to etch patterns of destruction across the Alamo's reinforced outer walls, each impact a jarring thud that vibrated through the very foundations, a prelude to the storm. But this wasn't just a fortress. This was the Alamo. And for the Texans, that name was more than just a place, it was a rallying cry, a spiritual inheritance. You could almost feel the ghosts of their ancestral past, whispering tales of independence and defiance through the cyber-enhanced walls, urging them on. When the Aggies finally breached the first defensive line, it wasn't a clean, surgical strike, not in the way they'd planned. No, the Texans, bless their stubborn, individualistic hearts, weren't about to play by their rules. The battle didn't unfold in neat formations or strategic advances. Oh no. This was something far more primal, far more Texan. Imagine this: the Aggies, with their synchronized movements, their perfectly aligned energy rifles, their carefully rehearsed tactics. They marched into the breach expecting a predictable resistance, a set-piece battle they could systematically dismantle. What they got instead was a hurricane of improvisation. Individual Texans, armed with everything from souped-up sonic carbines to jury-rigged explosive devices, swarmed them like a hive of angry, incredibly creative wasps. One moment, a lone sniper would pick off an Aggie officer from a concealed vent. The next, a team of 3, not a squad, mind you, just 3 guys who happened to be in the same place, would unleash a volley of highly personalized projectiles, some of which probably started life as farming equipment or modified sports gear. There were no battle lines, only zones of intense, brutal, and utterly unpredictable skirmishes. The Alamo became a labyrinth of close-quarters combat, every shadow a potential ambush, every corner a new, desperate gamble. This was the grand, chaotic battle, the ultimate showdown between the mechanizers and the individualists. The Aggies, for all their technological superiority and drilled discipline, were constantly thrown off balance. Their computer-aided targeting systems struggled to lock onto targets that moved with such erratic, independent grace. Their strict chain of command floundered trying to issue orders that could encompass such widespread, decentralized defiance. Every corridor, every room, every utility shaft became its own miniature battlefield, a testament to Texan ingenuity and their refusal to be heard. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. If you found value, meaning, or inspiration in this journey, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter. Your support helps us bring more timeless classics to life. See you in the next reading.